I just saw this post from BR Gaming saying that on this day, 19 years ago, the PSP was released in America. My goodness, I'm not that old, man. I'm not that old. I'ma already say this. The PSP is one of the most underrated consoles of all time, especially when you're talking about the portable gaming realm. The PSP was like the first of its kind for a lot of things, man. It had Wi-Fi built into this thing. It had MP3 player. I think it even introduced like an app store eventually. You had the UMDs, which, I mean, UMDs may not have been the highlight of the PSP, but they were so satisfying to slide into that tray and push the back into it. Like, the PSP is essentially the precursor to PS3. The user interface you can see right here is pretty much what the PS3 ended up being. It was just graphically so ahead of its time. It looked way better than the Game Boy Advance, and of course the DS, which would be its main competitor. Looked way better than the DS. It didn't have a touchscreen, it didn't have a stylus, but it didn't matter because it still had an analog stick, and that allowed games like Daxter. I remember I had the Dynasty Warrior games that was on here. You could play SOCOM. You could play all these games online, and you didn't have to pay for it at all. It was just crazy because, like I said, this time frame, the 2005, 2004 time frame, Wi-Fi, broadband internet was still kind of, it wasn't quite household. I had Roadrunner, so I thought I was the hot stuff. But if you had Wi-Fi and you were a young kid like me, a teenager, I mean, the whole world opened to yours. Not to mention the software updates, how hackable this thing was. I'll never forget, I had the software, it was like 2.71, and that was like the bad boy at the time. You could put PS1 games on there. You converted them into, I think, eboot files. I remember all this stuff. You could put Super Nintendo on there. I think even Game Boy Advance. You could put all the old school consoles. And these things are still selling now. People are still buying these. You can get them off like AliExpress now. This console just had so much going for it, man. It even introduced me to Persona. I played Persona 3, got stuck because the game was so hard for me when I was younger. There was just so many good games. And if you like to tinker, I think this was the perfect console to tinker. The only downside I'd have to give the PSP, other than the UMDs being a little finicky, was that you had to use the Memory Stick Duo, which was their own form of a memory card. Sony was notorious for doing this with their products back then, especially their cameras. I had a Sony camera, and I believe it used Memory Stick Duo as well. And not only were they way more expensive than a regular SD card at the time, they usually had a lot less storage on them too. So you were paying a lot more for less storage. But anyways, I went on this rant too long about the PSP. It shows you how much I really care for this thing, man. I need to boot mine up and get back into it. But let me know what your experiences have been with the PSP. If it's something that you still use to this day, and if you've hacked it, if you've messed around with it, if you used to play music on it, had wallpapers, everything. But a good flashback to my childhood, and I can't believe this was 19 years ago, man. Right into my teenage years. Appreciate y'all, and if you like the video, of course, hit the like, hit the heart, hit the plus, subscribe to the channel, you know what it is. Talk to y'all later. Peace out and deuces, y'all.